Last year, I visited Vermont to know more about their beekeeping practices in that beautiful state, very famous for their beautiful environment and the quality of their product. To my surprise, after several visits to many beekeepers, including my friend Mike Palmer, the reports I received directly from the beekeepers were not enthusiastic. Huge colony losses and discontentment. You can find all the videos I made about Vermont beekeeping in the description of this video. However, a couple days ago, my followers started sending me some materials questioning what was reported in my videos. To my surprise, the Department of Agriculture of Vermont released several materials stating that the beekeeping industry in Vermont is thriving like never before and there is nothing to be worried about. Is the beekeeping in Vermont thriving or not? I invited several beekeepers from Vermont to discuss this topic again, and this is what they have to say.
I want to feel from the beekeeper doing the job from the field. What do you think is the major threats facing honeybees in Vermont right now?
Well, I think the problem we're facing is similar to the problem most beekeepers are facing all over. In my view, the biggest problem is the pesticides, especially the neonicotinoid systemic type pesticides, because not only can they affect the bees directly, but they aggravate the other problems. They make the mites worse on the bees. They make the diseases harder on the bees. They reduce there's forage issues with the pesticides for the bees. And it bothers me that, that's the one, pesticides is the one thing we have total control over, right? We produce them, we distribute them, we spread them. We can solve that one if we wanted to. But to get back to your initial introduction and your question about the Vermont Department of Agriculture, what we're seeing and why they're just reporting on the statistics. They're not reporting on the reality of what's going on in Vermont with Vermont bees and beekeepers. What happened back in 2015 is the Vermont State Legislature passed a new law that required all Vermont beekeepers to register their bees with the state. And there was going to be, for the first time ever, a fee associated with registration. And lo and behold, in 2016, the first year that the Vermont Department of Agriculture is using as their baseline for the number of bees in Vermont, that year there was a sharp drop in the number of beekeepers and hives registered in the state. Apparently, there are beekeepers that didn't like the idea of having to pay the state to register their bees. So you have this artificially reduced number of bees being reported to the state as the official number that they're now using as a baseline to compare today's numbers with. And so that's a big part of the issue. The other part, of course, is that the majority of bees in the state are migratory. They don't stay in the state. Right now, most of them are down in southern part of the United States, places like North Carolina and Florida, and then they bring them up for the. And then what happens is the law back in 2015 also changed the reporting deadlines. So it used to be before 2016, beekeepers would report their bees and their numbers at any time during the year. And so because of the wild fluctuation in colonies in Vermont, you wouldn't get a consistent number as much as you do now. It's actually much more, I think, accurate today with the new system, because today, by July, all bees are supposed to be reported. And that, of course, is after all the bees have been brought up from down south. All the beekeepers in Vermont have made their nucleus colonies and their splits to replace their lost hives or for sale. And so you're going to get the maximum number in July. And so, again, comparing that today's numbers, which are very accurate and are the maximum amount found in the state, with 2016, when it was artificially depressed because of the new law that just went into effect, we're not seeing an accurate picture of what's really going on with bees.
Okay, so perhaps I need to go back and maybe to introduce the people at home, what was reported? What I read was basically the message out was Vermont beekeeping was the best ever because the higher number of hives. Andrew, do you want to tell what did they say?
Sure, I can handle that for a little bit, and I think Mike will want to chime in when I'm done. So Ross pretty much nailed it with his description of the numbers that are being reported are the total numbers that are registered with the state, and it is not the same. Total hive numbers are not a proxy for the health of the bees.
Yeah.
If I reported that there were 300,000 dairy cows in Vermont, that would not tell you anything about the dairy industry and the health of the dairy industry if they were making money, especially if 150,000 of those dairy cows were dying every winter. And so what you really want to be looking at to determine the health of the beekeeping industry in Vermont is the loss statistics. And the agency ag themselves do a survey when they do that registration. And the loss reported from the registration survey is about 25% average over the last 3 years, with no data reported for last year. I'm not sure why that's missing, but the previous 2 years were like 24.9%, somewhere in there. If you look to the nonpartisan group, the Bee Informed Partnership, they've got data from Vermont beekeepers that shows an average winter loss over the last 4 years of about 59%. There was 1 year that was extremely high, that was probably all the usual suspects plus an unusual drought. But the typical winter loss we're seeing these days is anywhere from 35 to 50% and up, depending on the beekeeper and the specific location. So if you look at the annual losses rather than the total number of registrations with the state, it gives you a much more accurate picture of the health of the industry.
I see. So if I understood, they are just reporting the total number of registered colonies in the state and using this number, comparing with previous numbers, because this number is higher, they conclude, therefore, I have more bees, therefore, they're healthy. The beekeeping industry in Vermont is healthier. Is that what they're claiming?
That's what they're claiming. Just by numbers. Okay, so say you're a typical Vermont beekeeper with 10 beehives, and you lose 5 of them in the winter.
Yeah.
And you discover this winter loss in March or April. And then you buy packages of nucleus colonies, and you restock the dead hives, and you re-register the apiary in June, and so by July you have the same number of beehives that you had before. But it isn't the truth. It isn't the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The fact is that you lost half your bees. So half the bees in that apiary died. Does that mean they're healthy? Because now he has 10 hives of bees again? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that they're half dead. And so where did those packages come from? Georgia, Florida, Texas, and nucleus colonies. Unless the beekeeper can make some splits. But if you lost half your bees, do you think the other half are splittable? Of course not. Yeah. So you have to be buying bees all the time. I lost 60% of my bees last year between October and March. Thank God I had nucleus colonies to replace them. That's why I call them heifers, because they replace my replacements. Thank God I had that. And then I went on to make a reasonable crop of honey. But in a little while, we're going to be talking about neonicotinoids, which is the other issue, which is maybe why we're having these unexplained losses. And I've got a bunch of number here in my apiaries. You're going to be shocked at how much clothianidin is in.
I want to know all of that. Let me just go to.
I know. Just saying, they're bad numbers that the state has because they're not as Andrew says, taking into account the losses. Suppose a beekeeper has 2,000 beehives and goes to Georgia, okay, and suffers a big loss. They're not going to suffer the loss here. They're going to suffer the loss there. They split up their bees. They replace all their dead bees, and they come back with 1,000 more. Now they come back with 3,000. Oh, man, the bees in Vermont are getting healthier every day. Come on. You know that's not true.
Just to chime in on what Mike's saying, the other big factor here is the lost opportunity cost. Those of us that make a lot of nucleus colonies used to sell thousands and thousands of dollars worth of nucleus colonies every year. And a couple of years ago, the state reported that there were fewer than 100 Vermont-produced overwintered nucleus colonies sold that year. I used to sell more than that just myself, let alone what Mike sold and Kirk sold and everybody else.
Exactly.
But we're all having to use them to replace our dead outs. If you take a look at Mike's example with 2,000 hives, if you lose half of them, you lose 1,000. You can get $200 for a nucleus colony these days. You can do the math. That's $200,000 in lost opportunity to sell the nukes that you ended up using for yourself.
Yeah, it is a lot of money, that for sure. Bianca, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, I mean, as a young business owner in the state with looking at this as my whole future, I feel like I'm in the business of recovering from loss as a whole. We make our projections based on a 30% annual loss. Some years are better, some years are worse. Similarly to Mike, we had 61% loss last year. And I mean, we made a bunch of nukes and we recovered pretty well. But if I'm making 300 nukes, do I want to be putting them back all into production, or would I rather be, there's no question, just like Andrew said, I could be making a lot of money and then maybe getting a new truck. That'd be awesome. But that's not likely to happen anytime soon because of the situation that we're in. And I understand that those are some risks that come along with farming, but it doesn't seem like that comes with other farming industry as readily as this one. This is sort of like an accepted standard for some reason, and that's a little bit disturbing. It's not deterring me, or maybe I'm thick or something, but the reasons are clearly pests, pathogens, pesticides, environmental change, and there's not a lot. I mean, there's stuff being done about it, but the attention being called to it isn't quite enough considering the situation that we're in.
Chess, let me put you on the spot then, because can you tell me, compare a little bit with the past, like with your grandfather? Give me that little perspective.
There's a few of us here who are been keeping bees long enough to know what it used to be like before corn and soybeans were covered with neonicotinoid seed coatings. And we used to only lose bees in the winter. I'm finding in my operation, and I think others here do, that we're losing a lot of bees before we even pack them in the fall. And we used to lose, if we lost 10% of our bees, this is in the 80s and 90s, we thought it was a really bad winter. And we used to lose 3 and 4% of our colonies. That was pretty normal. Now, every once in a while, something came along like tracheal mite that would be we'd have a bad season, a bad year for that. But those things came, once every 20 years, Mike, maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that would come along and knock you back, and it would be for a year, maybe two. And the bees, healthy bees that weren't crushed by agrochemicals, would overcome that problem on their own through genetics, through breeding, through evolving, which they're not doing now. And they cannot overcome their problems because of this pesticide pressure. And the state of Vermont has simply regurgitated propaganda that we've seen nationally. That same argument has come out in the United States. Oh, the U.S. has more bees than it did in 1975 or whatever today. the bee industry is doing great. And it's all generated by the chemical companies, these articles, these things that come out. And it's just complete propaganda. It's not scientific. It's nothing. It's not the amount of bees that exist. Beekeepers have gotten really good at making bee colonies. Okay, we're farmers. We've tried to work around these problems that are outside of our control. And the state of Vermont wants all their constituents to think they're doing a great job. But really, we've gone and testified on this stuff over and over again. We've tried to get these chemicals out, and they ignore their Vermont farmers, their Vermont beekeepers. And they go on and let it continue. It's not benefiting the farmers that are using them. It's really detrimental to us. It's actually detrimental to the farmers who are using them. They're not keeping bees, they're keeping cows. It's a little harder to see. But it's killing their soils. It's killing the pollinators that contribute to even their row crops. There's been studies that show that pollinators can contribute 30 to 40% to row crops. Because corn is wind pollinated doesn't mean bees don't go to it. They do. They go and work corn. Yeah. So,
but
this is
so
just
Chas,
it's disappointing from my ag department. I'm pretty disgusted with.
I'm sorry to hear that. It is frustrating. I understand that, and so that comes to my question now. Why this came out now? The first thing that I
now because New York passed the birds and bees bill.
Oh, that's will be my next question, because that's the only thing I can think of.
And Quebec has gotten rid of these things. New York will be in the process now, and Vermont's getting to be surrounded by neighbors who have done something about this problem. The Quebec farmers have seen no change in their crop production or anything. There's no problem getting rid of these things where, nationally bird populations are down 40%, field birds down 70, 80, 90%, depending on the species. It's just a disaster environmentally. It's a disaster for our ecosystem. And we don't even know what it's causing, where bees are doing things that have nothing to do with our agriculture in our world. And you talk about native pollinators who don't have beekeepers. I was told 90% of our native pollinators in Vermont are ground nesting, and they found 5 parts per billion of neonicotinoid 2 inches down in the soil on a field that was never planted in corn. I mean, what's happening there? We're just killing the world, this green Vermont that we all love, that we have a reputation of having, fresh air, good water, great products. And the state ag department, instead of trying to support that, and, by doing this would be a great boon for our products. We're getting rid of these unnecessary poisons out of our system. No, they want to, they want to protect the chemical companies who are the only people profiting in agriculture. Follow the money.
Yeah, but Chaz, don't you think? Don't you think that part of the issue is the state of Vermont trying to support the dairy farms, which they have given tens and tens of millions of dollars to in the last decade or more? So now they have to support them. They're not going to let that fail. So they have to support them in a way that they think is somehow beneficial. Which, look, in Quebec, they had no results at all. No positive results. No negative results when they ended clothianidin. So it's the ag agency trying to protect the dairy farmers. Now, why did they come out with this right now? Well, the Vermont Bee Lab did an across the fence, this little ag 15-minute show after the noon news in Vermont. And she talked about the pesticide levels in pollen and things that, why the bees are suffering. And so a few days later, well, sure, the state comes right out with this malarkey about more bees means more health and whatever. Come on. That's why they did it.
I
as,
agree, Mike.
as,
They
a,
think
re-
they're
as
protecting.
a rebuttal to what the Vermont Bee Lab said.
I think they're trying to protect dairy farmers, or they think they are, but they're not protecting dairy
Oh, of
farmers.
course not,
These
but they
things
think
are not
they are.
good for dairy farmers, but they don't want to look at real science. They want to have, complete unscientific response that look how many beehives there are in Vermont. It's ridiculous.
Of
We
course,
deserve better than that.
of course we do.
Chess, when you guys say it's not protecting the beef, the farmers, is because they're not getting the return of investment of this product, so it's not really protecting anything. So the farmers
There have been many benefit analysis of using these chemicals. Even the EPA did one, and they are little to no benefit. And when they say little to no benefit, it's something like it helps 10% of the farmers 10% of the time. It's ridiculous. And in the north, it's even less beneficial than in the south. And that's why if they looked at the science, it's not helping. It's killing earthworms and beetles and the soil. Vermont farmers are trying to do all this technological stuff because of runoff to make water safety. The state has been on them to, no-till, all kinds of technological changes to what they're doing. They're working really hard to make things better. And then they put this stuff in the ground and kill the soil they're trying to get to grow and be more and healthy. So it's not good for the Vermont dairy farmers. And I don't think it's in any interest of a Vermont dairy farmer to kill our bees. I'm sure it's not. I know many Vermont dairy farmers. Our bees are on some of their lands, and we've had relationships for 3 years now.
Decade. Right.
Andrew, I thought you saw you're raising your hand, Andrew. You want to say something?
Yeah, so UVM Extension just got a big $120,000 grant to study this issue. And ironically, I think that the gal who was doing it, Heather Darby up at UVM Extension, was anticipating finding different results than what she ended up getting, but she actually found no significant economic difference between the fields where the seed was treated with fungicide only and the fields that were treated with fungicide and neonics. So it was even lower than what Chaz was talking about. There was really no substantive difference in from the different crop fields. So when Chaz and Mike are talking about little to no benefit to the dairy farmer, that's what we're talking about. This stuff is simply used because that's the seed that's available. So one of the important parts of the New York bill is there's a window of time, 2 to 3 years, to allow the seed companies to start providing seed that's treated with only fungicide to keep the seed from rotting in the soil. And then after that provision sunsets, and the only seed that will be legal to sell will be fungicide only.
I see. But I still not believing, okay, make a lot of sense, the timing, but I'm trying to be fair with the other side. Why are you going to pick this metric, number of hives, to try to claim? I think that's the worst metrics that can you possibly use to measure honeybee health. Why this one? There is anybody that understands bees there?
What else are they going to use? They could use colony loss, which is more of a true measure. But they don't want to do that because then they're admitting that there's an issue of some sort. Well, we don't know what that issue. Well, we do. They don't know. We as a whole don't know what it is. We have to prove it. I've got numbers here. As soon as you're ready, I've got some numbers here that are going to
I am ready.
blow your mind. Okay. So you already know I've been at this 50 years. So, it's been a while. I remember before mites, I remember back in the good old days, I remember the changes of agriculture and discounting poisons. There's no more pastures. Okay. That's where white clover was. There's no more hedgerows. What was in the hedgerows? Berries and basswoods and sumac and And all those other wildflowers that are in the hedgerow, they're all gone because they got to have another 20 feet of corn. You know, there's no more hay fields. It's all corn. They've turned the Champlain Valley into a corn, and the pesticide levels have exploded. So, okay, look, let's think about 2 years ago when the Bee Lab did the first pollen trapping, and you know, the list of understand that years ago when I was on the Pollinator Protection Committee, Carrie Gigier, the boss of the deal, took me aside and told me that they looked for neonicotinoids in beehives and they couldn't find anything in the bee bread. I believed the guy. Why wouldn't I believe the guy? Why would I think the Vermont Ag Agency is in any way against us or, well, baloney, you know? So, but then the trapping the other year, 2 years ago, 109 parts per billion of atrazine. Okay, atrazine is an herbicide that they stopped using. No, they didn't. They didn't ban it. They put it on the restricted list. So that means only an applicator can apply it. Okay, 109 parts per billion in that pollen. 189 parts per billion of metolachlor, which is another herbicide. So that's for pre-emergent. You know, they're just dosing the land with herbicides, okay, and fungicides. The list that I got of contaminants from Cornell in my pollen was unbelievable. But also 5.31 parts per billion of clothianidin. So what's the baloney coming from the ag agencies is, oh, we couldn't find anything. And what about the pollinator protection specialist who last summer at the meeting said, oh, we couldn't find anything of significance in the trapped pollen. What a crock. Of course, look at it. Okay. That was very concerning. I was told by the lab that 5.31 parts per billion is above is enough to do damage to the honeybees. Okay, it's being fed to the larvae and then remnants to the jelly to the pupa. So you know it's there. But then this year, I just got my new pesticide residue report from this summer. Okay, in May. This is the May count, you know, planting time. Let's see, the Yandell yard. Now these yards are pretty much down in the valley. The Yandell yard, 6.87 parts per billion. Oh, that's gone up. Allard yard, which is 2 miles away, 5.64. And the most very concerning one that I have is the Decker yard. Now, the Decker yard is my cell building yard. I got something like 25 really strong hives there. My God, you wouldn't believe how strong those are, and 60 brood factory nukes. But those 25, you know, last year, coming into 2023, with, I'm sure, high clothianidin, and we didn't measure it that year, I had about a 90% loss in that apiary. I treat my bees 5 times a year. What do you want me to do? You know, I treat them all the time against mites. And the dandelion, I mean, come on. Now, how does clothianidin get in dandelion pollen? Dandelion pollen doesn't come from treated seeds. Oh, it's migrating through the soil into the dandelions, 4.41 parts per billion. All these numbers are surely above the sublethal effect for the bees. Surely a sublethal effect. And what's happening to our bees? Unexplained losses, unexplained dwindling. What the heck do you think is happening if you take a hive of bees and you change the longevity of the bees from 6 weeks to 3 weeks? What happens? Dwindle. What happens? We're losing bees in September and October. Why? Dwindle. Well, what's the dwindle coming from? I've seen it in drought. Same thing happens. Now we're seeing it with, I believe, pesticide. And those are my numbers.
It is
sick.
It is complicated. Yeah. Andrew, you want to say something? You raise your hands.
Yeah, just to go a little bit further than what Mike was saying, at the end of the month, I'll be giving the keynote address to the State Beekeepers Association. And I'll be sharing the testimony that I gave to the State Agriculture Innovation Board about the neonicotinoid pesticides. And at the time, we had the 2022, which is the second year the UVM Bee Lab was collecting pollen samples. So I collected a bunch of studies that were all about the effects on bees based on levels that we've actually seen in the hives based on these samples that were collected and tested at the Cornell lab. And any studies that used levels of exposure to the test colonies that were higher than what we had seen up to that point in Vermont, I did not include in the testimony. And I just want to say that when Mike was talking about the sublethal effects, the harmful effects of the neonics start at around 0.02 parts per billion. So 5 parts per billion is incredibly high. And if you get a whole lot higher than that, then you're going to start getting into acute lethal effects rather than, a chronic exposure with sublethal effects. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in attending, I'll be sharing that talk with the State Association on the 27th of January at the Heinsberg High School, Champlain Valley Union.
I'll be glad to share this information, Andrew, but I want to jump in here a little bit because you're talking about 5 parts per billion, and then from one, 10 parts per billion from another. People said sublethal effect. But I know for a fact from the lab doing myself, this is just a combination. When you have these things combining with each other, that become a weapon of war. This is demonstrable. I can do this over and over in a laboratory. I can show to everybody this in real time. So the science is there. I don't know why people don't talk about that too much. It's easy. It's much easier for all the pests and pathogens and all the other problems to take over when the bees are fighting to detox, because all the detox pathways, talking about the molecular system of the bees, are connected with the immunology of the bees. And when are we going to talk about this? I'm talking about this for what? My first video with pesticides was almost 6 years ago. I was the only guy on the internet talking about this. And I'm glad finally somebody's catching up and you guys are talking about that, because enough is enough. I don't know what else I can say anymore. Bianca, do you have something to say? You're so quiet over there, and just...
I'll be quick because Ross raised his hand too. But we had some curious die off this fall, and I mean this goes further into something that I feel about the reporting to the USDA, where you have to say that it's CCD, even though there's a multitude of reasons why this might have happened that can't necessarily be summed up by one thing, and that we should be exploring a bit further and getting testing done, etc. And so we're seeing those things too, like CBPV losses, and dealing with all of that at once it's just an immense weight to carry for everyone. So
I just wanted to follow up with what you were saying, Humberto, about all the chemicals that are spread around the landscape here in Vermont, hundreds of tons a year, and how they synergistically combine, which is why whenever possible, I always try to encourage people to avoid using pesticides and avoid buying products from other people that use the pesticides, which is why personally, whenever possible, I'm always buying from organic farmers or just farmers that are doing more ecological farming. Because to me, where we put our money, that we're voting, right? And we want to try to create the world. What we need is really ultimately to treat pesticides the way we're treating fossil fuels, slowly trying to ease them out and stop using them, because they are, if you look at all the studies, honeybees are kind of holding their own, because as you can see just from this discussion, beekeepers are working overtime just to stay in business, to keep their bee numbers up. But no one is out there taking care of all the native pollinators. And they, from all the indications, are in serious decline, along with all the other insects. And those insects are a keystone for life on this planet.
Yeah, we forgot to all the pollinators, birds, and everything else. When I go to places, sometimes I saw a lot of those kills, a lot of birds dead. Pretty sure it's because of that.
Yeah, I mean, these are incredibly delicate species we're talking about. Fewer pesticides in the environment is just going to be better for everyone if we can educate enough to get to that place. I feel like education has to be a part of this too, because so many farmers don't understand, and we're a part of that as well with the pesticides that we have to use. And yeah, a lot needs to change.
So
definitely not healthy.
Yeah, this is the other part. I traveled for 3 years at University of Florida with commercial guys visiting farmers and beekeepers, commercial beekeepers. And I think farmers knows, they don't, nobody wants to hurt anybody. Farmers are good people. They know, they're concerned. The great majority of them, I feel they are concerned about that. They just feel trapped with some narratives and scared, and they keep using because they don't have a, how we're gonna say. I don't wanna frame the farmers as a problem here. I don't think farmers are problems. They're the solution for the world. They work super hard, but they are in a trap sometimes with fear and can you guys elaborate on that? Do you feel the same or just me? Andrew, please.
So I think Chaz touched on it earlier. Really, the struggle here is with the companies that are making all the money off of these seed fields. Farmers really don't have any alternative to plant. So even if Extension came out and said, really, you don't need to use these seeds that have the neonics on them because your bottom line is going to be the same whether you use them or not. There isn't an alternative available on the market. And so that's where legislation is needed. Without a requirement that non-neonic treated seed be sold in Vermont, it's not going to be, because Bayer can make money selling the neonic treated seed. They have no motivation themselves to provide an alternative.
Yeah. So then, to summarize then, since we start this, I can say that the beekeeping industry in Vermont is not okay. So nothing changed from the last time we talked about. Okay, good. That's I think that's a Mike, please.
Yeah, in a way, it's getting worse. Now Bianca brings up the idea of education, and I agree. The people have to be educated, and it's the people that can change things. If the voice and the strength and the force of the people get out there and say, no more alar on apples, what happened? They got rid of alar on apples, right? Okay, so I believe that what we're fighting against is this ag agency who's coming out with ridiculous numbers saying that they're healthy because there's more bees. Well, that's number one, but that was in order to get the people to talk about, wow, the bees are so healthy in Vermont, isn't it special? That's, to me, is what that was all about. Well, now they've come out with what's called the Pollinator Protection Bill, okay? And so if you're a pesticide applicator or a farmer or whatever, you have to notify the bees on your property, on the premises. Well, what about your neighbors? But you have to notify the beekeeper within 48 hours, minimum 48 hours before you spray. Could you answer me one thing? What am I supposed to do when the apple orchard that's on the other side of the hedgerow says, I'm going to spray, and it says before they spray blooming plants, and they list apples and other fruits. and things that are flowering, and they can spray it as long as they tell us by 48 hours before. What does that do? Does that release the spray company for culpability when they kill our bees? I mean, really. So I don't know. What am I supposed to do? How many beehives I wonder how many bed sheets Walmart has. Am I supposed to go to Walmart and buy every bed sheet they have so I can go out and cover my bee and then drag around 5-gallon buckets and dump it on the beehives? Come on. I suggest that they put in a provision saying that they have to mow the orchard, understory, between the rows, before they spray. I saw plenty of pesticide kills in apples. Why was that? Because they sprayed, even though the plants weren't blooming, the dandelions were. And again, I got a pesticide kill. I've seen that a lot of times. So this new law, here's another one. They're relieving themselves of the responsibility for killing somebody's bees because, we notified the beekeeper at least 48 hours beforehand. That's absurd. It's absurd.
Think we can herd them up and put them in another field?
Yeah, right. Well, we can't though. No, we can't because then we'll be too close to the butt ass. We'll be too close to him. You can't move your bees because then you'll be 0.1 miles too close to somebody. What? How are we supposed to move our bees? What are we supposed to do?
It's a ridiculous situation we're in with these chemicals, and it can be solved. The science is there. It's been there for a long time. We've given the state the science. We've handed it to them. If science is ignored, what is it? And then you come out with, I don't know what this is, trying to take numbers of colonies to justify health of bees. That's not even pseudoscience. I don't know what that is. That doesn't make any sense at all.
That's the one that hit me the most. Like, okay, if you're gonna use
It
something,
doesn't make any sense to us, but it does to the people watching across the fence.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's the whole point of it.
Enough, it's true.
That's the point of it.
This is something we really need to get away from. And I say the farmers in Vermont, they need to be made aware of this. They need to be made aware of the science that shows that they're destroying their soils, which is damn key to agriculture and the business they're in. Okay, it's all about your soil. They know that. It's like treating us all like ignorant and wanting us to stay there. And it's not fair to the people of Vermont that these chemicals are out there causing all kinds of damage to our state, and it's just being ignored and allowed to happen. It's wrong. It's wrong for everyone.
It is. I was paying my yard rents off, and I stopped in at a big dairy farm, a huge dairy farm. And I talked to the guy, we get along great, and talked to his Mexican help, and it's a nice place to be, the Mannings, And I show him the list of pesticide that was found in my pollen. I mean, it's this big, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, neonics, whatever. It's huge. And I pick on one and I say, metolachlor. Do you use that in your fields? There's 189 parts per billion in my pollen. And he says, metolachlor? I don't know. I don't know what we use on our farm. And that's the case. They don't know what they're using on the farm. They're going according to the Extension Service and the Crop Services Company and the pesticide applicators. And this is what you got to do. They don't even know what's going on.
There was a long, well-planned road to get where we are now by these companies that sell these chemicals. And first they monopolized the seed industry and bought up most of the seed supply in the country. And that there were many sciences of agriculture, regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, all different types of agriculture, and there's chemical agriculture. And chemical agriculture has just dominated our agriculture in the United States. It's just become the one. And that was really forced upon us, not chosen. And these farmers, I don't think, they never asked for seeds with neonicotinoid seed coatings on them. They started coming with neonicotinoid seed coatings, and they were told, hey, this is the latest technology, this is the greatest, this is going to protect you from this and that. They get a bag of corn seed from $80 to $425 in the process. It's the whole ag community and the public has just gotten bamboozled and scammed by these companies. And we need to recognize that. And it's a democracy. We need to do something about it.
Andrew.
So leading into that, I just pick up where To's left off. The Vermont Beekeepers Association is working with a coalition of other, public-facing groups like Audubon and the Xerxes Society for Invertebrates, and VPERG and Conservation Law Foundation, Vermont Center for Eco Studies. And the whole goal is to mount a statewide education campaign to share with the public, to let the public know what's going on, what the alternatives are, and hopefully to introduce some legislation to make some of these changes happen. So, we can sit around and talk about what's wrong and what's broken, but it's also important to talk about how we're going to fix it. And I agree with Chaz and Bianca that education is really the way to go with fixing it. And we've tried in the past, and we've found that speaking the truth to the legislature isn't good enough. We have to speak the truth to the public. We have to get the public on board. And if enough people care, maybe we can start to move the needle in the right direction.
My guess is they'll care.
Mine too, and I think it's the only way, really.
It is the only way. Yep.
All right. So I think we said it all. So nothing changed from our last conversation then. I was kind of, these guys, they tricked me when I was there. Everything is fine. No.
Yeah, it changed. It changed.
Humberto,
My numbers went from 5.31 to 10.7 parts per billion. That's what changed. My God.
That's what happens after 20-something years of using a prophylactic pesticide or using a pesticide prophylactically that's not even considered a pesticide because of the treated article loophole. And this was all well planned out so that these companies can get around, standard operating procedures of using pesticides. I think it's a pie in the sky idea that we could get rid of all pesticides. I don't think that'll happen, but I think we don't have to use ones that aren't of any benefit for sure. Let's start with that. And then there's a lot of ways agriculture can reduce the need to use pesticides. And I think in Vermont, they're trying to do a lot of that with, no-till and cover crops and all these other things they're doing. They're doing some amazing things, and then they're going 2 steps forward and 3 steps back when they put these seeds in the ground.
They spray it with Roundup, the cover crop. And turns brown and blows away. Never gets put in the soil.
Yeah, Roundup's just being used a little bit ridiculously.
For Vermont, the government, back in the pollinator protection committees that we had for months and months and months. Well, agree or not agree, at the very end, we decided to at least have some kind of an IPM approach. So you have to go out and test your fields and sample your fields before you plant for wireworms and whatever it was. The legislature shot that down, of course. Why? Somebody came and told us. Sid, what's his name? Sid, your friend there, Chaz. Sid Bosworth. Sid, yeah, he came and told us how to sample a future cornfield for wireworms and whatever. Seemed pretty easy, pretty logical. Oh no. No, can't have that either.
Well, I think the Vermont Ag Department are really on the wrong side of this issue, and I really think it would be nice if they really tried to do their job and got on the right side of the issue. But I don't have any faith in that. I've been, God, I don't remember the first time I testified in Montpelier to try to let them know, as a Vermont beekeeper, going to the Vermont legislature, what was going on. It was 2015 or 2016, if not before that. And I don't know who they're listening to, but it's not the farmers of Vermont.
So, Umberto, you got to understand that all of those neonicotinoid treated seeds, they're also genetically engineered to be Roundup ready. So the bees get a double dose, like you were talking about before, more than one chemical combining and so I want to just take a moment to thank you for helping us to educate the public and get the word out. Because as you heard earlier, I mean, that's going to be a big part of the solution.
My pleasure. That's what I do for a living. And stay tuned for my pesticides video series then, because education is key and I need to talk more about pesticides in my channel. So this year is going to talk a little bit more about that. All right. So thank you again one more time for your time, for the short notice. I think this is important. I am not happy with the answers, but at least I know nothing have changed from our last conversation. So I was not getting crazy. Good to know that.
You had a bad dream.
I had a bad dream, yeah. Now we're let's keep following this, educating people and try to solve the problems, changing legislation and things like that.